One introduction. ROSEP view: the United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only. For home building and furniture building, for just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions, yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry, and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue. Presumably because it is called renewable, wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree, but it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM 2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut-down and burned tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM 2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lungs, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM 2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom, the Eco-Design Wood Stove, and International Convention does not count the emissions from wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. ROSEP view: purple air PM 2.5 monitors hanging from the eaves of the house of a near neighbor should be used to measure the level of PM 2.5 in the air hyperlocally in the yards of near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners. If PM 2.5 levels exceed World Health Organization standards of 5 micrograms per cubic meter annually, then that evidence of air pollution from wood burning should lead to the shutdown of that indoor residential wood burning appliance, one appliance at a time if necessary.
Hi, my name is Lily. Andrew gave you the intro to Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates and their concern for air pollution from indoor residential wood burning. Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates, or ROSEP, would like every near neighbor of an indoor residential wood burner whose wood smoke enters their yards and sickens the near neighbors to have a purple air PM 2.5 monitor hanging from the eaves of their home to measure the level of PM 2.5 entering their yards. That measurement of air pollution should be used as evidence of unnecessary air pollution, and each indoor residential wood burner should be shut down based on that evidence, one indoor residential wood burner at a time if necessary. The presentation by Andrew ended at 2 minutes 5 seconds. The same presentation by Emma starts at 2 minutes 3 seconds before the end of this podcast. So I am Lily, your timekeeper, and you can start the next podcast at 2 minutes 5 seconds in if you would not like to see the presentation by Andrew a second time. This presentation by me, Lily, ends at 5 minutes in. What you will see in the main content of this ROSEP podcast will be news about air pollution from indoor residential wood burning, and how that air pollution is being combated by ordinary people just like you who are unfortunately near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners at this time. There will also be news about unnecessary and highly polluting use of wood as fuel in industrial wood burners and preventable air pollution from wood burning wildfires. There will also be news about air pollution from PM 2.5 from gas-powered cars. There will also be news about airborne diseases which are also preventable with vaccines such as COVID-19 and measles and whooping cough, to name just a few. In 2025, Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates is also concerned with combating the Trump destruction of government funding for programs which protect human health through the Department of Health and Human Services, and Trump destruction of programs which fund the science and medical research plan to protect human health from preventable illnesses. Protecting human health is a patriotic act, and our defense against enemies is weakened if we are not as healthy as we can be. Heat pump rebates are now offered by the federal government, distributed through the eligible United States, are available in 2025, and are the best, cleanest, and now cheapest alternative to indoor residential wood burning if that burning is actually done to purportedly save money. Wind and solar as sources of the electricity that powers heat pumps and electric cars is also cheaper than burning wood. The adverse health effects that are caused by indoor residential wood burning also come at a cost to near neighbors, both in shortening and ending their lives, and in actual hospital, clinic, and funeral costs. Instead of being compensated monetarily, near neighbors should instead be able to achieve immediate relief by stopping indoor residential wood burning in their hyper-localized neighborhoods, which relief readings from purple air PM 2.5 monitors used as evidence of air pollution will help them achieve. Welcome to news about hopeful scientific and medical achievements that will also help us achieve the goal of clean air to breathe.
Webisode 57DHYAFC, December 11, 2025. Hundreds quarantined in South Carolina Measles Outbreak. In Webisode 57DHYAFC, 1 Arkansas Fayetteville Solar Energy, 2 Georgia. The Centers for Disease Control CDC releases a study that contradicts vaccine ideas of RFK Junior. 3 Indiana Republican redistricting resistance before December 11, 2025 vote. 4 New York Cornell University research. For real, a natural history of misinformation. It is not just humans who suffer from leading one another astray, so do fish, flies, and even bacteria. 5 New York Hudson Valley, how to fight rising utility bills. Take over the company. Activists say 6 Ohio bird flu is suspected after vulture carcasses sat rotting outside Ohio school. 7 South Carolina Measles Outbreak. 8 Texas Geothermal Energy is clean energy. Not all drilling in Texas is about oil. 9 The Trump approval ratings are low again. This time, it might matter. 10 Europe is worth fighting for. 11 Ukraine. Russia warns Poland over arrest of a Russian researcher wanted by Ukraine. 12 Bulgaria government resigns after mass protests against corruption. 13 Influencer on the internet. I love when my enemies hate me. How Hasan Piker became one of the biggest voices on the U.S. left. 14 Film actor Amanda Seyfried says she will not apologize for calling Charlie Kirk hateful after his shooting. 15 United Kingdom. What will be the cost of the Keir Starmer new medicines deal with Donald Trump? The lives of British people. 16 United Kingdom. The U.S. is engaging in extreme right-wing tropes with echoes of the 1930s and threatening chilling interference in European democracies. British MPs warn ministers on Thursday. 17 18 and 19 headlines. Main content. 1 Arkansas Fayetteville Solar Energy. This Arkansas city shows how to slash emissions and save money too. In the Ozarks, the growing college town of Fayetteville, Arkansas, is using clean energy to power city facilities and embracing nature-based solutions to climate threats. Accepts edited by ROSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship with residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times. December 9, 2025. Fayetteville, Arkansas has proudly worn colorful descriptors over the years. Crunchy, funky, kind of a granola hippie environment. Fayetteville drew back to the land enthusiasts in the 1960s. It is a city where 25 years ago, a 53-year-old grandmother tried unsuccessfully to stop mature oaks from being raised for a retail development by taking up residence in a tree for a few weeks. The Fayetteville tree hugger ethos has endured as Arkansas has moved further to the right. We are definitely a blueberry in a bowl of tomato soup, said the Fayetteville environmental director. It has also underpinned the Fayetteville clean energy and sustainability projects, which have helped the city save money/emissions and weather storm. Solar panels installed in 2019 at the 2 wastewater treatment plants of Fayetteville supply 2/3 of the city energy needs and cut its electricity costs by $2.2 million. A farmer uses compost from the city food waste program at his farm. The solar arrays have on-site battery storage, and both are connected to the power grid. According to a local utility official, the systems were critical to keeping the lights on during Uri, the 2021 winter storm that caused deadly power outages, especially in neighboring Texas. We are way ahead of the pack in Arkansas, but we are not competing with Arkansas. We are competing with the world. 2 Georgia. The Centers for Disease Control CDC releases a study that contradicts vaccine ideas of RFK Junior. COVID vaccines reduce the likelihood of children in the ER and urgent care visits. The CDC reported the vaccines were found to decrease the risk of needing medical care in the first 6 months after vaccination by 76% in children under 4 and by 56% in children 5 to 17. Accepts edited by ROSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship with residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times. December 11, 2025. COVID vaccines administered last fall sharply decreased the risk of emergency department and urgent care visits in children, according to new data released on Thursday by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The data published in the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report, the premier publication of the CDC, provided a striking counterpoint to the Trump recent rhetoric about the vaccines. The report showed that COVID shots cut the risk of needing medical care in the first 6 months after vaccination by 76% in children under 4 and 56% in children 5 to 17. The researchers analyzed data collected through the virtual SARS-CoV-2 influenza and other respiratory viruses network, or VISION, which includes electronic health records from medical centers in 9 states. They looked at pediatric visits to emergency departments and urgent care clinics from August 29, 2024 to September 2, 2025. They analyzed more than 44,500 such visits among children 9 months to 4 years old and more than 53,000 encounters among children 5 to 17 years old. Health Secretary RFK Junior has described COVID shots as the deadliest vaccine ever made and restricted their availability for healthy pregnant women. In September, advisors to the CDC handpicked by RFK Junior recommended that all Americans should receive a COVID shot only after consultation with a healthcare provider. Over the last 2 weeks, officials at the Food and Drug Administration have said that COVID vaccines may have led to deaths in children and adults. They have not produced data to support those assertions. This week, the Health Defense of Children, the nonprofit group founded by RFK Jr., petitioned the FDA to revoke approval of the mRNA vaccines made by Pfizer and Moderna. COVID vaccines have been monitored for safety for as long as they have been available, but beyond rare heart problems, primarily in young men, no serious concerns have been identified. This latest MWR reinforces what the pediatric research has been saying for years, said Dr. Peter Hotez, dean of the National School of Tropical Medicine at Baylor College of Medicine. Dr. Hotez helped to develop a COVID vaccine that was administered to millions of adolescents in India. The burden of pediatric illness from COVID is significant and justifies the importance of COVID immunizations, he said. Dr. Dean said she is concerned that new barriers to access might be decreasing the number of children who are vaccinated. Parents definitely want to keep their kids out of emergency departments and urgent care, she said. 3A Indiana Republican redistricting resistance before December 11, 2025 vote. Republicans are fighting with one another in deep red. Indiana here is why some Republicans in the Indiana Senate have resisted a new congressional map despite lobbying from the White House and threats of political consequences. Accepts edited by ROSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship with residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times December 10, 2025 on paper, at least Indiana seems an unlikely place for an all-battle between Republicans over President the Trump redistricting campaign. The president carried Indiana in a 19-point rout last year, and his party has huge majorities in the state legislature, but as Republicans in other states have redrawn political maps to gain congressional seats and please the president, a critical mass of Indiana lawmakers has resisted the fate of the Trump-preferred map, which passed the Indiana House of Representatives on Friday, remains in doubt ahead of key votes this week in the state Senate, where Republicans hold 40 of the 50 seats. Opposition by some Republicans has lingered even after Trump called out individual senators on social media, branding some as rhinos or Republicans in name only and promising to endorse primary challengers against those who buck him. On Friday, Trump released a list of Republican senators, saying he had heard that they need encouragement to make the right decision. Still some see signs that the Trump grip on Republicans might be weakening. Mr. Clear, the House Republican against redistricting, said, "I think it is fair to view this debate and its ultimate outcome in that larger context of the Trump waning influence and the growing pushback against him, but the main reason the Indiana legislature is voting on a map after months of resistance," Mr. Clear acknowledged, is that the White House extended so much political capital making that happen, and if this legislation makes it across the finish line, he said it will be entirely because of the pressure campaign 3B Indiana Republican redistricting resistance before December 11, 2025 vote, with Republicans divided. Indiana Senate set to vote on redistricting. President Trump wants a new congressional map in Indiana that would boost Republicans, but he has struggled to win over some state lawmakers in his party, accepts edited by ROSAP for brevity and clarity in relationship with residents against would smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times December 11, 2025. The Trump months-long effort to convince Indiana Republicans to redraw the Indiana congressional map is expected to reach a resolution on Thursday, with a divided state Senate set to vote on boundaries that would position Republicans to flip the Indiana only 2 U.S. House seats held by Democrats, despite Republicans holding 40 of the 50 seats in the Indiana Senate. And despite Trump and his allies threatening political consequences for Republicans who do not fall in line, passage of the new map is no sure thing. Indiana, which Trump carried by about 19 percentage points last year, emerged as an early target in the off-cycle redistricting war that started this summer with Texas Republicans, but as lawmakers in other states, both Republicans and Democrats, voted for new maps meant to boost their party in the midterms. A critical mass of Indiana Republicans resisted for months. Trump has pledged to back primary challengers against Republicans who vote against the map and has singled out some senators on social media. The fight in Indiana is an attempt to boost Republican odds of a congressional majority, but has also become a test of the Trump ability to get what he wants from rank-and-file Republican officials after Texas passed a new map to boost Republicans over the summer. Several other states entered the redistricting fray. California voters approved a Democratic plan to counter the Texas gerrymander. Republicans in Missouri and North Carolina also passed new maps, and Virginia Democrats started a remapping process. But in recent weeks, skepticism about the tit-for-tat map drawing has spread within both political parties. Several Kansas Republicans scuttled a plan to call a special session for redistricting, and Maryland Democrats have been publicly at odds over the idea. For New York Cornell University Research for Real, A Natural History of Misinformation, it is not just humans who suffer from leading one another astray, so do fish flies, and even bacteria, accepts edited by ROSAP for brevity and clarity in relationship with residents against would smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times December 9, 2025. Earlier this year, the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine issued a warning about the dangers of misinformation. Social media platforms are now rife with scientific falsehoods that the Earth is flat, that climate change is a hoax, and so on. Misinformation can lead to large-scale harm, undermining public health and the well-being of the planet. The authors of the National Academy's report said the stakes in understanding the origins, spread, and the impact of misinformation about science are high. They warned for some fresh inspiration. Misinformation experts can look beyond our species. That is the advice from a team of Cornell researchers writing on Wednesday in the journal Interface. It is not just humans who suffer from the effects of misinformation, so do fish flies, and even bacteria. I hope we can learn something from these natural systems, said a computational biologist and an author of the new study. Fish do not deal with misinformation by getting smart. They do not fact-check each signal they receive from other fish. Instead, they adjust their sensitivity to any information, true or false. We clearly need more ideas for how to cope with this problem as a social species. Dr. Hine said maybe it is possible to find some if we look at other species. 5 New York Hudson Valley, how to fight rising utility bills. Take over the company. Activists say a grassroots coalition is trying to push New York State to use eminent domain to buy out Central Hudson Gas and Electric and replace it with a public authority, accepts edited by ROSAP for brevity and clarity in relationship with residents against would smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times December 10, 2025. Everyone complains about their energy bills, but few take any action in the New York Hudson Valley. A coalition of officials, activists, and community groups are trying to do just that by taking over their local utility. On Wednesday, the coalition released a feasibility study by the Texas-based NewGen Strategies that found that replacing the utility, Central Hudson Gas and Electric, with a public authority was feasible and could result in customer savings within the first year of operation. The savings are relatively modest, 0.1% on gas and 2% on electric delivery rates, but they are expected to grow over time, particularly for electric customers. The study found reducing energy bills is not the only goal. The coalition wants the New York State energy system to be more responsive to its customers and better positioned to respond to the climate crisis. Public power efforts have popped up in Rochester and on Long Island, though neither has yet taken hold. And while few New Yorkers cherish their utility company, Mayor-elect Zoran Mamdani and President Trump reportedly traded complaints about Con Edison at their White House meeting last month. Central Hudson customers have more gripes than most in 2021. A new billing system resulted in late and missing bills, improper shutoffs, and more than $16 million in inflated charges automatically withdrawn from bank accounts of customers, according to a public service commission report. The errors led the company to settle with the commission for nearly $65 million in 2024. That same year, Central Hudson requested a rate hike of $181 million. The commission, which oversees utility rates, approved a smaller but still sizable increase that amounted to roughly $12 a month per customer. That led Ms. Hinchy and others to call for reform of the commission. Access to utilities and to heat and electricity is not a luxury. This is something that people need, and we all need to survive, she said. If people cannot afford it, that is unconscionable. 6 Ohio bird flu is suspected after vulture carcasses sat rotting outside Ohio school. The birds lingered for days at a Catholic school near Cincinnati as agencies haggled over who was responsible for removing them. Officials said the public health risk was low. Accepts edited by ROSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship with residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, December 9, 2025. Dozens of vulture carcasses left decomposing for days outside a Catholic school in Ohio while agencies pointed fingers over who was responsible for cleaning them up. Were believed to have been infected with bird flu. Health officials said on Monday at least 2 of the 72 carcasses have tested positive for bird flu amid a resurgence of the virus, according to Claremont County Public Health. The risk to humans was low. The department said additional testing was being conducted on the birds, all of which the Ohio Department of Natural Resources Division of Wildlife said were presumed to have been infected with bird flu. The large die-off of vultures in Ohio coincided with a rise in cases of bird flu, which has caused the deaths of millions of farm birds in the United States since the beginning of September. The virus often flares up in the fall as birds migrate south. Dr. Lakdawala said that it was important to follow up with people who might have had contact with the birds and test them for the illness, which she said can cause conjunctivitis, also known as pink eye, and mild respiratory symptoms. The incubation time is around 2 to 4 days from exposure to infection, she said. 7 South Carolina Measles Outbreak. Officials report accelerating measles outbreak. Thanksgiving travel and low vaccination rates have contributed to 27 new cases in state during past week. Accepts edited by ROSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship with residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The Guardian, December 11, 2020. 5 South Carolina health officials have reported an accelerating measles outbreak in the state in the wake of Thanksgiving travel and a lack of vaccinations, with hundreds of people in quarantine. The outbreak, which appears centered on a single church and several schools in Spartanburg County in the South Carolina Northwest, according to an epidemiologist for the South Carolina Department of Public Health, totaled 111 cases. Of those, 105 were unvaccinated, while 3 were partially vaccinated. A state epidemiologist said a further 254 people have been placed in quarantine as of Tuesday, with 16 held in isolation. Accelerating is an accurate term. That is a spike in cases we are concerned about. She added that South Carolina has lower than hoped for vaccination coverage. The rise in outbreaks is partly attributed to mixed messages on vaccines coming from federal health officials, including RFK Junior, the health secretary, who has expressed broad skepticism about the number and frequency of vaccines given to children in Northwest South Carolina. Bell said the deployment of mobile health clinics offering MMR shots had not been heavily utilized. I can tell you that a relatively small number of doses was administered at each of the mobile health unit clinics that we offered, she said. 7B South Carolina measles quarantine. Hundreds quarantined in South Carolina as measles spreads. The outbreak shows no signs of slowing, likely because of lower than hoped for vaccination coverage in the affected area, a state health official said. Accepts edited by ROSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship with residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, December 11, 2025. More than 250 people who were exposed to measles, including dozens of school-aged children, are quarantining in South Carolina as the state wrestles to contain an outbreak that has sickened more than 110 people. The outbreak comes during what has already been one of the worst years for the virus since it was declared eliminated in the United States more than 2 decades ago. Cases have been centered in Spartanburg County along the northern border of the state, and the virus appears to be widely spreading through the community. People have been exposed at a church, a healthcare building, and several schools in South Carolina. Some unvaccinated students were exposed to the virus on 2 separate occasions, leading them to quarantine twice for 21 days each. That is a significant amount of time. Vaccination continues to be the best way to prevent the disruption that measles is causing to the education of people to employment. State officials have ramped up MMR vaccination efforts, though it is unclear whether they have made a meaningful impact. There has been limited uptake in the affected community, said a spokesman for the Department of Health and Human Services. He added that vaccination was the best way to protect against measles and encourage people to talk with a doctor about what is best for them. Nationally, more than 1,900 measles cases have been reported so far this year. 3 unvaccinated people, including 2 children, have died. Canada has also grappled with large, deadly measles outbreaks this year, leading it to lose its elimination status officially last month. While measles symptoms typically resolve in a few weeks, the virus can cause pneumonia, making it difficult for patients, especially children, to breathe. It may also lead to brain swelling, which can cause lasting damage, including blindness, deafness, and intellectual disabilities. For every 1,000 children who get measles, 1 or 2 will die. 8 Texas Geothermal Energy is clean energy. Not all drilling in Texas is about oil. The state has become a hub of innovation for creating electricity using geothermal power. Just do not call it renewable. Accepts edited by ROSEP for brevity and clarity in relationship with residents against wood smoke emission particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The Guardian, December 9, 2025. Near a coal-fired power plant sits a unique kind of industrial Battery 1 that uses water pressure and the techniques of hydraulic fracturing to store energy deep underground, and then release it to generate electricity when the time is right. The energy storage system, known as a geopressure geothermal well, is among the most concrete examples of how some Texas oil and gas workers and executives are applying their knowledge of the underground to geothermal energy teams that drill for oil. Can just as easily drill a geothermal well that overlap. Has helped make Texas a hub of innovation in the expanding world of what is considered next-generation geothermal power. Some of the most prominent startups are based in Houston, not far from the campuses and office towers of major oil companies like Chevron, Shell, and ExxonMobil. Winning support for the emerging industry in Texas has meant courting oil and gas companies, as well as Republicans in state government. One key is to avoid potentially polarizing discussions of climate change. Even though geothermal energy does not emit the kind of planet-warming pollution that is produced by fossil fuels rated by an aging coal-fired plant with electricity provided by solar power and battery storage, both renewable technologies have already become deeply ingrained in the Texas electricity system. A cooperative decided to also incorporate the geothermal battery after its chief executive visited a test well in South Texas and became convinced it could be one of the long-term answers to our storage problems. He said the CEO became enough of a believer that he recently left his position at the cooperative to pursue his own geothermal projects. A staff lawyer with the Sierra Club, who has worked to transition the coal plant, said the inclusion of the novel geothermal project was encouraging the old coal-fired power plant, and its adjacent mine had been a major employer for years in the area, but to keep running it would need more lignite, a type of coal that emits more carbon dioxide than other types of coal. The top county official in McMullen County has been in litigation for years to keep them from digging beyond their existing leases and to protect a local creek like other Texas officials. He did not talk about climate change. I am neutral on that, and instead focused on protecting the land. I just want us to be good stewards of the water that we drink and the air that we breathe. He said the transition to geothermal is intriguing. He said especially if it helps to close down the coal plant. 9. The Trump approval ratings are low again. This time, it might matter. Accepts edited by Rozeb for brevity and clarity in relationship with residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, December 11, 2025. The opinion writer is a Republican pollster. If Trump is to turn things around before the 2026 midterm elections, he will need focused messaging along with concrete results which Americans can feel in their pocketbooks. Eggs may be cheaper today than 1 year ago, but many things people pay for are not, and the job approval numbers for Trump reflect that pain. 10. Europe is worth fighting for. Accepts edited by Rozeb for brevity and clarity in relationship with residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, December 9, 2025. Opinion columnist. If Germany were invaded, just 38% of its citizens would be willing to fight for their country, according to a recent poll. 59% would not. In Italy, another poll found that only 16% of those of fighting age would take up arms. In France, General Fabien Mandin, the Army Chief of Staff, told a conference of mayors last month that the nation would be at risk if it wavers, because we are not ready to accept losing our children. This statement of the obvious set off a political furor. It is in this context that the Trump latest national security strategy, released last week, landed in Europe with a thud. It is not hard to see why American chief foreign policy priorities, according to the document, are now focused on the Western Hemisphere and Asia. The European Union stands accused of suppressing political freedom, subverting national sovereignty, obstructing economic dynamism, and obstructing a peaceful resolution to the war in Ukraine. It is far from obvious, the document warns, whether certain European countries will have economies and military strong enough to remain reliable allies. These are the talking points of the European far-right. Russia is never treated in the document as an enemy of the United States, just as Ukraine is never treated as an ally. It is tempting to dismiss the NSS as unsettling, but unserious. It has no legal weight, and its prose reads as if it might have been written by the auto character from a fish called Wanda, the thin-skinned, thick-skulled American bully, played to antic perfection by Kevin Kline. But as with so many other populist arguments from the right or left, the problem with the NSS lies less in its falsehoods than in its half-truths. It names many of the core problems, while proposing the worst remedies. Among the core problems, Europe represents an ever-shrinking share of the global economy, particularly when it comes to industries of the future. Where are the European equivalents to Nvidia, Microsoft, Meta, SpaceX, Amazon, or Apple? But the crucial element for military success is not money, it is the will to fight. Except for frontline states like Finland and Estonia, Europe does not seem to have it. 11. Ukraine. Russia warns Poland over arrest of a Russian researcher wanted by Ukraine. Poland detained a Russian archaeologist who works on an ancient site in Crimea, which Russia seized in 2014. Ukraine calls the work illegal. Accepts edited by Rozeb for brevity and clarity in relationship with residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, December 11, 2025. The Kremlin has threatened Poland over the arrest of a Russian archaeologist on a Ukrainian warrant, saying the act will not go unpunished. The archaeologist Alexander Budyagin, an employee of the Russian State Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg, oversees archaeological research into an ancient Greek site on the Crimean Peninsula, which Russia illegally annexed from Ukraine. In 2014, Kiev still claims sovereignty over Crimea, sees any archaeological work there since 2014 as illegal, and considers any antiquities taken from the site to be stolen. Russian diplomats had visited Budyagin. His lawyers plan to appeal his 40-day detention. Historical and cultural heritage have become battlegrounds since Moscow seized Crimea, a trend that accelerated after Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022. Kiev has reported that Russian soldiers stole many prized artifacts from territories it occupied. 12. A Bulgaria government resigns after mass protests against corruption. Prime Minister makes announcement before parliament vote on no confidence motion filed by opposition. Accepts edited by Rozeb for brevity and clarity in relationship with residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The Guardian, December 11, 2025. The Bulgarian Prime Minister has handed in his government resignation after less than a year in office after Weeks of mass street protests over its economic policies and perceived failure to tackle corruption. Hasan Piker announced his resignation on television shortly before Parliament had been due to vote on a no-confidence motion submitted by the opposition and before the country is due to join the Eurozone on January 1st. Protesters are particularly angered by Delian Pievsky, a former media mogul whose DPS New Beginning Party is one of an array of several factions from across the political spectrum that backs the Zelyaskov minority government. Pievsky, who has been hit with sanctions by the US and the UK for alleged corruption, bribery, and embezzlement, is accused of influencing government policy to favor oligarchs. 12b Bulgaria. The Prime Minister of Bulgaria resigns in the face of mass protests. Prime Minister Hasan Zelyaskov announced he was stepping down, becoming the latest leader to leave in the past 4 years amid public anger over corruption and democratic dysfunction. Accepts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity and relationship with residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, December 11, 2025. The Bulgarian Prime Minister resigned on Thursday after less than a year in office, acknowledging the voice of the people after mass protests against his government. In recent weeks, speaking to reporters in the parliament in the capital, Sofia, Prime Minister Hasan Zelyaskov announced he was stepping down, becoming the latest in a revolving door of prime ministers to leave over the past 4 years. His departure was fomented by continued economic instability in one of the European Union consistently poorest countries. Bulgaria is set to join the Eurozone on January 1st. The Zelyaskov announcement came only minutes before lawmakers were scheduled to vote on a no-confidence motion against the government. The movement against the Zelyaskov minority-run government has simmered for weeks over a proposed budget for next year that would have increased taxes and social security contributions to finance increased public spending. It was also to be the first budget for Bulgaria counted in euros, as Bulgaria formally adopts the euro currency. Christine Lagarde, the president of the European Central Bank, predicted last month that the move could briefly increase inflation. The head of the Bulgarian National Bank said the currency shift was still going forward despite the government upheaval. Bulgarians have also been frustrated over government corruption and democratic dysfunction. 13 influencer on the internet. I love when my enemies hate me. How Hasan Piker became one of the biggest voices on the US left. Every day, he broadcasts a marathon Twitch stream, airing his views to his 3 million followers. It has led to fame and some fear. Accepts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity and relationship with residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The Guardian, December 11, 2025. There is a jarring overlap, or more often disconnect, between the online and offline worlds. Piker finds himself in this in-between space more and more these days. Until fairly recently, the 34-year-old was familiar only to the very online, especially Americans in their 20s and 30s, largely thanks to his presence on the streaming channel Twitch, where he has 3 million followers. But since Donald Trump election, Piker has become an in-demand voice in the real world for his views on the beleaguered political left, and especially that inordinately fretted over demographic young men. Predictably, this also makes Piker a favorite hate figure of the political right. Democrats continue getting in the way of the left flank candidate the American left could arguably do with someone like Piker. Someone who is genuine, incisive, a skilled communicator with a loyal fan base, and easy on the eye, but it does not sound as if Piker is tempted. He makes the occasional appearance on panel discussions, podcasts, and even television, but he is not tempted any further into traditional media. He says partly because he would not enjoy the levels of editorial control, but also because the audience is moving in my direction and away from legacy publishers. Perhaps he is more useful where he is fighting it out, cutting through in what to many is hostile or alien territory. But on top of that, he still clearly enjoys it. I find a lot of emotional fulfillment in what I do. As he is talking, he has got one eye on the clock and his message feed. It is nearly 11:30 right now. My offline chat is freaking out that I am not live yet. 14 Film actor Amanda Seyfried says she will not apologize for calling Charlie Kirk hateful after his shooting. The housemaid actor received backlash in September when she left a comment on Instagram after the right-wing activist was killed. Andrew Pulver accepts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity and relationship with residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The Guardian, December 11, 2025. The housemaid star Amanda Seyfried has said she is not apologizing for describing Charlie Kirk as hateful after the latter was shot dead in September. Seyfried was speaking to Who What Where when she was asked about her social media activity, including the backlash around her Kirk comment. I am not apologizing for that. I mean, I commented on one thing. I said something that was based on actual reality and actual footage and actual quotes. What I said was pretty factual, and I am free to have an opinion. The Seyfried original comment, "He was hateful," was posted in response to an Instagram reel, which compiled a set of the Kirk most controversial quotes and sparked much criticism. She subsequently posted a separate statement on Instagram on September 17, 2025, saying, "I can get angry about misogyny and racist rhetoric, and also very much agree that the Charlie Kirk murder was absolutely disturbing and deplorable in every way imaginable." 15 United Kingdom. What will be the cost of the Keir Starmer new medicines deal with Donald Trump? The lives of British people. More than £3 billion that could have been used for UK patients will go to Big Pharma for its branded products. Money for care siphoned off for profit. Accepts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity and relationship with residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. The Guardian, December 11, 2025. Of Arthur Scargill, it was said that he began each day with 2 newspapers. The leader of the miners read the Morning Star, but only after consulting the Financial Times. Why did a class warrior from Yorkshire accord such importance to the House Journal of pinstriped Londoners? Before imbibing views, he told a journalist he wanted to get the facts. In that spirit, let us parse a deal just struck by the governments of Donald Trump and Keir Starmer. You may not have heard much about this agreement on medicine, but it is huge in both financial and political significance, and Downing Street could not be more proud. A world-beating deal, boasts the Science Minister Patrick Vallance. It paves the way for the UK to become a global hub for life sciences. claims the business secretary Peter Kyle, with a government press release adding tens of thousands of NHS patients will benefit. Except that is not the view from Washington. A major win for American workers, says the trade secretary, which ensures that the breakthroughs of tomorrow will be built, tested, and produced on American soil. The health secretary RFK Junior claims results that put Americans first. One deal two. Diametrically opposed readings. Who is right? The answer, I regret to inform you, is the Trumpettes. Take this headline from the liberals at the New York Times. To avoid tariffs, UK agrees to the Trump demand to pay more for drugs. Starmer and his team have not only been handed a costly defeat, they are misleading you and me about what it means for our NHS, our future treatment, our lives, because modeling suggests this will almost certainly cost British lives. An organization devoted to saving lives, the National Health Service NHS, is now being used as part of trade deals. Its precious resources and structural integrity haggled away to multinational companies and foreign bullies. Labor never ceases to remind voters that it gave them the NHS, yet in chasing the unicorn of fabulous economic growth, its leaders are now changing the very purpose of its proudest creation. 16. United Kingdom. The US is engaging in extreme right-wing tropes with echoes of the 1930s and threatening chilling interference in European democracies. British MPs warn ministers on Thursday, excepts edited by Rozeb for brevity and clarity in relationship with residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization, The Guardian, December 11, 2025. The House of Commons rounded on Donald Trump national security strategy, which stated that Europe was facing civilizational erasure and vowed to help the continent correct its current trajectory and promote patriotic European parties. A Labour MP and chair of the Joint Committee on the UK National Security Strategy said the United States consensus that has led the Western world since the Second World War appears shattered the prospect of United States interference in the democratic politics of Europe. I believe is chilling. The absence of condemnation for Russia is extraordinary, though not surprising. He said the US pivot left the UK especially vulnerable. Another Labour MP and chair of the Business Select Committee said it was not hard to see the rhymes with some extreme right-wing tropes, which date back to the 1930s, and called for closer defense cooperation with Europe. Keir Starmer and his ministers have been cautious not to criticize Trump and have sought to play down the implications of the strategy document. The Russian government welcomed the document, calling it largely consistent with its vision. Trump continued to attack European leaders in an interview this week, saying, "I think they are weak, but I also think that they want to be so politically correct," Trump said. 17 headlines. The New York Times, December 11, 2025. Affordability. Housing crumbling. Parking garages get a new life as luxury housing. The New York Times affordability opinion. Why the affordability hoax is a trap for Trump. The New York Times affordability Senate deadlocked on healthcare votes. The New York Times affordability Senate expected to deadlock over healthcare in dueling votes. The New York Times affordability. This is not the first time the Fed has struggled for independence. The New York Times affordability. Trump does not want to talk about affordability. Democrats say that is a gift. The New York Times affordability. Trump gets to pick a new Fed chair, but a divided board still gets to say. The New York Times affordability. What is a Trump gold card? Applications open for $1 million visas. The New York Times. Bulgaria Prime Minister resigns in the face of mass protests. The New York Times. Canada. British Columbia closes highways to Vancouver after flooding and landslides. The New York Times. Car hatching the future of the automobile in a cloistered Los Angeles lab. The New York Times. Cars climate. Self-driving cars are coming climate forward. The New York Times. Climate change. Human interest. How can I stop my wife from badgering our friends about climate change? The New York Times. Democrats after shutdown. Democrats claim credit for funding they oppose. The New York Times. Europe opinion. What the Trump national security strategy gets right about Europe. The New York Times. Europe. Trump U.S. helped to weaken report at UN environment talks. Participants say. The New York Times. Film the Hollywood studio tour has become a lot of nothing. The New York Times. Food affordability as the price of beef stores. Restaurants are in code red mode. The New York Times. Housing affordability. America wants to build again. If you squint, you will see hopeful signs. The New York Times. Indiana redistricting with Republicans divided. Indiana Senate set to vote on redistricting. The New York Times. Minnesota. Republican Mike Lindell, my pillow founder, announces run for Minnesota governor. The New York Times. New Jersey affordability. Nursing homeowners pocketed millions as patients suffered. Report says. The New York Times. New York crime arson. He called to say the house of her mom was on fire. Prosecutors say he said at the New York Times. New York environmental agenda stalls under Kathy Hochul. The New York Times. New York City affordability opinion. How the Mamdani child care plan can succeed. The New York Times. Pakistan ex-spy chief sentenced to prison after court-martial. The New York Times. Republicans opinion. Is anything holding MAGA together? The New York Times. RFK Junior. Lack of knowledge of science and medicine. COVID vaccines reduce the likelihood of children in the ER and urgent care visits. The CDC reported. The New York Times. RFK Junior. Lack of knowledge of science and medicine for real. A natural history of misinformation. The New York Times. RFK Junior. Lack of knowledge of science and medicine. New Eli Lilly drug retatrutide brought major weight loss in trial. The New York Times. South Carolina. RFK Junior. Lack of knowledge of science and medicine. Hundreds quarantined in South Carolina as measles outbreak shows no sign of slowing. The New York Times. Syria rebuilding its military relies on loyalists and religious teaching. The New York Times. Taiwan affordability invokes national security law to protect TSMC trade secrets. The New York Times. Texas University. The conservative overhaul of the University of Texas is underway. The New York Times. Trump ideas always on my mind. The Trump enduring focus on Joe Biden. The New York Times. Trump ideas opinion. The Trump approval ratings are low again. This time it might matter. The New York Times. Trump ideas opinion. The Trump national security strategy memo declares global culture war. The New York Times. Trump military defense bill will make DC skies less safe. NTSB chair says. The New York Times. Trump military house gives bipartisan approval to $900 billion defense bill. The New York Times. Trump military opinion. America cannot make what the military needs. The New York Times. Trump Supreme Court support opinion. The Supreme Court and executive power. The New York Times. Trump Supreme Court support opinion. We are trying to find a line. The Supreme Court will not cross. The New York Times. Trump tariffs shrank the U.S. trade deficit in September. The New York Times Turkey largest city is threatened by a lurking earthquake. The New York Times TV Tony Dokupil is named anchor of CBS Evening News. The New York Times Ukraine Russia warns Poland over arrest of a researcher wanted by Ukraine. The New York Times Ukraine Zelensky says revised U.S. plan still calls for Ukraine to leave Donbass. The New York Times Utilities affordability. How to fight rising utility bills take over the company. Activists say. The New York Times Venezuela Nobel Peace Prize winner Machado says U.S. helped her leave Venezuela. The New York Times Venezuela Trump says U.S. seized oil tanker off Venezuelan coast. The New York Times Washington flooding intensifies as atmospheric river forces evacuations. The New York Times Washington 100,000 in Washington state ordered to evacuate as rivers rise. The New York Times 18 headlines. The New York Times December 10, 2025 affordability. Fed divisions will cloud interest rate decision at final 2025 meeting. The New York Times affordability opinion. The healthcare debate. We really need the New York Times affordability. The Trump Nvidia chip deal reverses decades of technology restrictions. The New York Times affordability. Why markets are getting anxious about the Fed. The New York Times Arkansas affordability. This Arkansas city shows how to slash emissions and save money too. The New York Times Canada plans to fast-track immigration for U.S. H-1B visa holders in new talent drive. The New York Times China affordability chip company plotted to send technology to China. Ex-CEO says. The New York Times Democrats make a fresh push to win state legislatures. The New York Times Democrats press to expand House map targeting 5 new GOP seats. The New York Times Europe opinion. Europe too is worth fighting for. The New York Times Indiana Republicans are fighting with one another in deep red. Indiana here is why. The New York Times New York Democrat Brad Lander will run for House seat with Mamdani support. The New York Times Oklahoma University of Oklahoma removes a teacher it says urged students to protest. The New York Times Ohio RFK Junior lack of knowledge of science and medicine. Bird flu is suspected after vulture carcasses sat rotting outside Ohio school. The New York Times Texas Geothermal Energy. Clean energy. Not all drilling in Texas is about oil. The New York Times Trump military opinion. America pours billions into the military. We do not know where it all goes. The New York Times Trump Supreme Court support. The liberal justices are not as united as you might think. The New York Times TV asserting a personal role in Warner Brothers battle. Trump seeks to expand his powers again. The New York Times TV late night does not want to sweat at the airport. The New York Times TV Netflix and Paramount battle for Warner Brothers. Have we seen this show before? The New York Times University's opinion. The early decision option is a racket. Shut it down. The New York Times Utah Nature tries relocating beavers to save them and remake the landscape. The New York Times Venezuela opinion. Trump picked this fight with Maduro. He cannot back down. The New York Times 19 headlines. The Guardian December 11th, 2025 affordability. It becomes like Zoolander, the podcast making you think differently about clothes fashion. The Guardian affordability. Hospitals and clinics are shutting down due to the Trump healthcare cuts. Here is where healthcare industry. The Guardian affordability. Senate rejects dual healthcare bills as Obamacare tax credits expiration nears U.S. Congress. The Guardian Australia affordability. Teenagers are presenting Christmas wish lists PowerPoint style. My daughter included Australian lifestyle. The Guardian. Bulgaria government resigns after mass protests against corruption. Bulgaria. The Guardian. Canada. British Columbia orcas team up with dolphins to hunt salmon. Study finds environment. The Guardian. Democrat. I love when my enemies hate me. How Hasan Piker became one of the biggest voices on the U.S. left. U.S. politics. The Guardian. Democrat Amanda Seyfried says she will not apologize for calling Charlie Kirk hateful after his shooting movies. The Guardian. Dirty energy. Lack of affordability. Economic growth no longer linked to carbon emissions in most of the world. Study finds fossil fuels. The Guardian. Europe. U.S. House passes bill to bolster the defense of Europe in apparent rebuke to the Trump foreign policy strategy. U.S. foreign policy. The Guardian. Exercise born to run. How exercise expanded the landscape of my life and got my mind on track. Joseph Erb. The Guardian. Iran. Affordability. Child bride spared execution in Iran after blood money is paid. Global development. The Guardian. Minnesota. Republican Mike Lindell Trump ally and MyPillow founder running for Minnesota governor. Minnesota. The Guardian. Montana youth activists who won landmark climate case push for court enforcement. Montana. The Guardian. Republican protesters interrupt Noam hearing with exorcist line. The power of Christ compels you. Kristi Noem. The Guardian. RFK Junior lack of knowledge of science and medicine. FDA to update regulations after unconfirmed claims of COVID vaccine linked death. Trump administration. The Guardian. South Carolina. RFK Junior lack of knowledge of science and medicine. Officials report accelerating measles outbreak. South Carolina. The Guardian TV. Go ahead and sue me. I am not afraid anymore. The South Park festive special is not afraid of a fight. South Park. The Guardian TV affordability. Seth Meyers to Trump. You cannot convince people the economy is good when they can see the truth. Late night TV roundup. The Guardian TV. Jared Kushner and 3 Arab monarchies are at the heart of the Paramount WBD bid. Mohammed Bazi. The Guardian TV. The U.S. government ruins Thanksgiving. It is a South Park holiday special. South Park. The Guardian. Ukraine. She was very thin. Witness tells of the final days of a Ukrainian journalist in Russian prison. Ukraine. The Guardian. Ukraine. Trump. U.S. wants Ukraine to withdraw from Donbass and create free economic zone, says Zelensky. Ukraine. The Guardian. United Kingdom affordability. What will be the cost of the Keir Starmer new medicines deal with Donald Trump? British lives a diffier checkerboardy. The Guardian. United Kingdom Trump ideas. U.S. engaging in extreme right-wing tropes reminiscent of 1930s British MPs warn foreign policy. The Guardian. Venezuela follow the path of exiles. The Maria Corina Machado U.S. aided escape from Venezuela. Maria Corina Machado. The Guardian. Venezuela Nobel laureate backs U.S. seizure of oil tanker Maria Corina Machado. The Guardian. Venezuela pressure on Maduro grows after U.S. seizes dark fleet tanker off coast of Venezuela. The Guardian. Venezuela. U.S. lawmakers condemn seizure of Venezuelan oil tanker. Trump is sleepwalking us into a war. Trump administration. The Guardian. Venezuela. What we know about the oil tanker seized by the U.S. off the Venezuela coast. Trump administration. The Guardian. Venezuela White House says those on board tanker are being interviewed in U.S. does intend to seize oil. U.S. politics live.
Red Green Fox here. The quick Red Green Fox jumped over the barriers to clean air. Red Green Fox here. Ready to sing to you the the names of the 2025 major wood-burning biomass industry subsidy opponents. 1. Biofuel Watch. 2. Bulkley Valley Stewardship Coalition of British Columbia, Canada. 3. Comite Schoen Luft, which means Beautiful Air Committee in German. 4. Dogwood Alliance. 5. Equity Group Foundation, nicknamed EGF. 6. Environmental Paper Network, nicknamed EPN. 7. Natural Resources Defense Council, nicknamed NRDC. 8. Prakaunia Narzeks Wysystkich Istit, which means Workshop for All Beings in Polish. 9. Rachel Carson Council. 10. Solutions for Our Climate, nicknamed SFOC.
Cat's corner strategy with Tiger and Leone. Saying the quiet part out loud. Roar. Hi, I am Tiger. Our human asked us to get up from our naps and start Cat's corner strategy with Tiger and Leone. She gave us a list of internet allies which we will post for her here.
Hi, I am Leone. It is better for your mental fitness to go to these websites than to go to bro sites for advice. Substack letters from an American Heather Cox Richardson. Substack your local epidemiologist. The Midas Touch. The Guardian. The New York Times.
One introduction. Rosette view. The United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only for home building and furniture building. For just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions, yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry, and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue. Presumably because it is called renewable, wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree. But it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen, and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM 2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut-down and burned tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM 2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lung, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM 2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom. The Eco-Design Wood Stove International Convention does not count the emissions from wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. Rosette view. Purple air. PM 2.5 monitors hanging from the eaves of the house of a near neighbor should be used to measure the level of PM 2.5 in the air hyperlocally in the yards of near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners. If PM 2.5 levels exceed World Health Organization standards of 5 micrograms per cubic meter annually, then that evidence of air pollution from wood burning should lead to the shutdown of that indoor residential wood burning appliance, one appliance at a time if necessary.